Great, thank you, David and James, for a really interesting conversation. It's been amazing, actually, to see the social mobility workstream really take off. And if you are interested in talking more about it, you can contact David and James, or also the workstream's executive sponsor, the brilliant John Terry, who is a fountain of knowledge in all D&I issues related. So we're going to be moving on now, and I want to move on with a little bit of pace. I'm determined to make up a little bit of time. But we're going to go into a really fascinating discussion next on hybrid working. And just to sort of set the theme for this session, I just want to sort of give you 4 points, actually, that I read in a blog this week that was written by Mitesh, actually. So I'm very glad you just arrived. But there was 4 points that were made here around the impact and the so-called silver lining in terms of the pandemic. And the 4 points that are here. So virtual meetings can be effective. There's a real alternative now to the rat race of the daily commute. We've discovered that we don't all need to be in the office all the time in order to be highly effective. And technology can not only connect us, it can also potentially help expand the pool of people that we're talking to and connect with colleagues internationally. And I really love those sort of 4 points. So to build on this theme further, we brought a number of the work streams together. So I'm really pleased to introduce Gareth, who's going to moderate and chair this session. And we're going to hear from representatives from the smart working, the disability work stream, mental health, and the neurodiversity work stream as well. So please do give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm conscious of time, so I think we're going to kick straight off, actually, and turn to my fellow co-lead of the Smart Working Workstream, Rosanna. Can you maybe very briefly just tell us what we're currently doing in the Smart Working Workstream at the Diversity Project?
Yeah, hi everybody. The Smart Working Workstream has been in existence since the beginning, and to be fair, we've been super busy with the COVID because we really thought, well, that's the once-in-a-life opportunity to really make the things pervasive across the industry. It's actually interesting that there are certain people that are talking to the return to the work after COVID, and like the chief people officer of Fidelis said, it's not return to working. We have been working all time. It's a return to the office. But what the work stream we have really trying to do is give example of what other firms have been doing. You find a lot of material on the website. But most of all, we sort of said, well, if that's a really once-in-a-life opportunity, let's push the button a little bit further. So inside the work stream, for the firms that are represented in the work stream, we have launched what we call the Project Push. So to make sure that the firms that are part of the diversity project actually are implementing formal policy in terms of smart working, of hybrid working. And that's what we have been working all year long. And I hope that by the end of the year or beginning of next year, you'll have live examples, the action that have been taken, what has worked, what has not been working, because maybe there are other companies that are on this path, and we hope to provide you with all the instruments to be able to achieve a real formal change in the policy of working.
Thanks, Rosanna. That's actually really helpful. And could you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing across our industry at the moment? I think you have some market intelligence that you can share with us.
Yeah, and that's public information. So one thing that we have been doing, and I know there has been small size company that sort of were looking, what other people are doing, what shall I do? And the return to the office has been different for the different company. You have a few examples. I think, I think I'm super happy because when you go through the list, yes, there has been some problem for company that have a location across a different continent because the legal framework is different, and maybe also the mindset of the chief of the CEO is different. But most of the company are really embraced. I've seen that people have been working, productivity have gone up. I think we are not shy of saying that probably the result, the business result across the industry are probably the best over the last 10 years. So the works can be done, and a lot of companies have really embraced formal or informal change in terms of policy. The return to the office has been a little bit different. You know, I don't think we should point a finger. That's the right way of doing. Each firm has a different way of really manifest the culture of their proper firm. Maybe they have been embarking in different projects. There is not the right answer. It is 2 days, 3 days. I think more or less all the company have settled on these 3+2 with a formal or informal policy. But you know, I think we should be all proud of the changes that have been done. And I hope, and we hope, and that's what we are working, that they are going to be formalized in policy changes.
That's great. And I think you also have some intelligence from our smart working work stream that you can share with us as well, right? Yes,
and you know, it's a little bit more on the same tune. This is a list that is unfortunately we didn't want to put the name because there are certain firms that don't want to appear publicly on the changes that are making because maybe they've not settled. I really invite you to go to our website because we have put together also a business case of what the firm have done. We've done a 3 half-an-hour call with Aberdeen, Fidelity International, and Square. I really wanted to take someone outside of the industry to sort of shake up and show what other people are doing. And I think it's important. We try to share the journey. Like I said, it has settled at different level, but there is a really clear engagement to go in the right direction for hybrid working.
Thanks, Rosanne. And finally, I think just talking about firms outside of industry, I think you also have some intelligence on flexibility in global firms as well.
Yes, and you know, I was at the beginning. I didn't know if it was interesting to share, but I think it is because it goes back to a point that has to few points that have come out. I think from the COVID. I mean, you've seen people that have changed the setup of the real estate because they sort of realize, well, maybe we don't need 100% of the people back in the office from 9 to 5 days per week. But above all, I think there has been really the realization that your pool of talent actually is not just around the zone where your office is. And go back to a point that have been raised in other conversation. Your pool of talent is really across the UK, but I will push even further. And in the Coldwell, for example, we did with Square, which is a fintech based in California. I mean, when they job advertise is to the world. And I'm sorry to say, you know, when you see the kind of push in policy that certain tech and fintech firms have done, they are sizing the best talent because they offer flexibility. It's put in the job advertising. And unfortunately, the new generation, a lot of the Generation Z, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at flexibility. They're looking maybe working in another country and still work for your firm that is based in London. I think it has to be seen as an opportunity in terms of enlarge the pool of talent, but it's competitive. And when you look at the push that certain firms have been doing in this area, it is going to become a very competitive war for talents.
Thanks, Rosanna, for those insights. They're really helpful. Perhaps, David, turning to you, can I ask if you have some initial thoughts you could share with us on return to office and the hybrid working model in your role as a member of the neurodiversity work stream?
Yes, thank you. I think if there's one good thing to have emerged from the pandemic, it's the realization that investment and savings professionals can and do work effectively and conscientiously, even if they're not being tightly fitted into open plan city centre offices. I think this is an important realisation because for many neurodiverse people, especially those with autism, the classic office environment has always been a major barrier to productivity. It typically involves sensory overload when commuting on public transport for long periods. Then again, once you arrive in the office, you're faced with a range of intrusive noises and conversations, and meetings can be even worse. It starts with the bewildering small talk etiquette, then people speaking across each other, expectations of eye contact being maintained, and reliance on reading the mood in the room, which assumes fluency in the strange language of facial expressions. Now, many neurodiverse people have found working from home much of the time a tremendous boost to their productivity and their well-being. And I believe that a significant portion of people are now dreading any enforced return to the office. As we've heard, the hybrid model can mean a mix of home and office working patterns that suitably reflect the needs of a business and its employees, and this can include some people not coming in at all or only by exception. But sadly, in some companies I've seen, it means everyone must come in for X days a week. These days are specified in advance. There really isn't any flexibility. It's as if working from home is being seen as some historic aberration and that being back at their desks is the way the world should be. One of my autistic mentees, who is seen as the guru in their particular technical field, has benefited hugely from the ability to work from home and have virtual rather than in-person meetings. Their employer has similarly benefited hugely from their spike in productivity. But now they're being told it's time for everyone to come back into the office, and they are unsurprisingly distraught at the prospect. And the only reasoning seems to be the idea that this is what normal should look like. Well, it may well be normal for people who are drafting these return to office policies, but it doesn't necessarily feel normal for a number of neurodiverse people. I'm really glad that we're getting to discuss this particular topic, because isn't part of what the Diversity Project agenda is about challenging the idea that the way things have always been done is the right way or is the only way? So if some minorities with protected characteristics find some return to office attitudes damaging to their careers or their mental health, then maybe it's the attitudes themselves that need to change.
Thank you for that, David, and perhaps turning to you, Tim, can I ask whether what David has just discussed resonates with you, and specifically, do you want to try and describe for us what the COVID pandemic and the last 18 months have been like for those people living with a disability?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the disability really, because in my work stream I've heard negative stories and positive stories. So there's a lady in my work stream who has MS, and working from home has been an absolute boom for her. You know, she's really benefited from it. Going into work prior to the pandemic, she really struggled, having to drag herself in because her disability means that she can't walk very far, and it's a real challenge for her. And so for her, working from home has been really good. And then we look on the other hand, somebody like me, who the pandemic has been quite challenging. So I remember when we spoke a few months ago on video call, and then we met in person, it was just totally different from me. Video calls, everyone is in 2D, not 3D, and we talked about that when we met just now. And I have to rely on the captions, and for the people in the room, I'm sure you've seen that the captions aren't quite perfect, so you pointed out to me black pumps with a press pub. So the words are difficult, and it means that I find it hard to follow conversations, and sometimes I can be accused of not participating enough. Yeah. Because the captions are slightly behind. Now they're there, and it's really helpful for me. Though it has been a real challenge for me in the pandemic. Yeah.
Thank you. And Jaya, perhaps turning to you now, do you think the events of the last 18 months have been a positive trigger for change from the perspective of your work stream? What sort of stories are you hearing as companies reopen their offices?
I think positive is really relative. It's kind of like what Tim was saying a moment ago. It depends on, you know, what your experience was overall. But I just want to take a really quick step back and just say to everyone who's joined online and everyone who's in the room right now, every single one of you has mental health. Every single one of you has mental health. What 1 in 4 of you unfortunately have is 1 in 4 of you may suffer with mental ill health. So that's something we massively saw over COVID, is such a vast amount of people really experienced a form of mental health, whether that was, you know, separation from loved ones, whether that was grief from losing loved ones, whether that was a change in your regular routine and having to readjust, the stress that can cause, the anxiety that can cause. It brought up a lot of conversations for a lot of people over the last nearly 20 odd months that we've been living through the pandemic. So I think positive is how you take it. I think positive is in that more people have been talking about mental health, which is really important to me, but it should be really important to all of you. And positive also in the sense that it's being recognised as an area that we all need some form of support in, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you, that's really helpful. And Rosanna, returning to you, we've talked a little bit about what the impact has been in terms of smart working over the last 18 months, but I guess just to go off at a tangent slightly, what are you seeing from our regulators and key stakeholders in terms of smart working?
It's very interesting because we had the head of the asset management at the FCA, Nick Miller, that has been always a super great supporter, and we have really shared with him, and he has been very, very open to all the input that we are giving to him in terms of look at how the industry is functioning during COVID. I mean, you remember that all the company, you were going on the FCA website and there were certain rules that they had to follow, but they were really, really nicely surprised of the way the industry had moved in working remotely. And the kind of conversation that we had with him is that the industry has to learn from that experience. And I think what has resonated very much in their mind is that whenever now they're going to do what they call the assessment of the culture, and you know the way the FCA, there are no rules, so they don't give you the menu, but you have to sort of read between the line. But one part of the culture, and like I said before, there is not the one scheme that fits all. The culture is very different from company to company. But the question will be asked, what have you done during COVID? How you are managing the return to the office? What kind of flexibility are you giving back to the employee? So it's going to be part of that assessment when the FCA is going to knock on the door. The other thing that I think has been touched also in other of the presentation is this area of the ESG. Diversity and inclusion, and the fact of being able to attract a different talent, the fact of treating well the employee is going to be part also of the question that you're going to be asked as an asset manager, and I'm be asked as a fund manager by the client in terms of D&I at the level of the industry. And being able to show some data of the fact, you know, that as the formal flexible working policy that we have implemented is actually written black and white on the employee handbook. That's the way people have been told or suggested how to come back to the office if they want to come back to the office. That's the way the job have been mapped in terms of flexibility on flexibility. These are all great things that you can be able to show and will be part of the assessment on the S on the ESG.
So incredibly relevant right now, right, in terms of some of our conversations around ESG.
Completely.
Thank you, Rosanna. And David, returning back to you, we've talked a little bit about the events of the last 18 months, and I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add on that, but what do you feel good support looks like for neurodiverse people as offices reopen? What currently from your work stream seems to be working?
Okay, to cover the first point, certainly there's potential for this to be a really positive trigger, unless as an industry we fail to remember this and revert to our old ways. I feel that the likes of Zoom, Teams, etc. are technological gifts that have been hugely liberating for many people. But please, these gifts are for life, not just for pandemics. I think we've seen that the cynicism associated with the phrase working from home has largely dissipated, at least so far as professionals in our industry are concerned. So from the neurodiversity workstream perspective, it's a case of preserving and then building on the progress that's been made already. Regarding your follow-up question, I think the challenge is for employers to reframe the question. What office working system best supports their employees and allows them to perform at their best? Good support is one that's tailor-made. It can't be one size fits all, as I think you said earlier. It reminds me of the anecdote, you probably heard it before, about the animal's HR department deciding that climbing trees is a core competency, thereby labelling all dolphins as underperformers. So while on average your employees might be in the office 2 or 3 days a week, for some neurodiverse people the right number probably isn't going to be the average, and your business will recognise that and will benefit from recognising that.
Right. And essentially taking a very tailored and individual approach.
Indeed.
Thank you. And maybe now turning to look at a couple of real-world examples. Firstly, at Aviva, how is a hybrid model working here, Jaya? What does return to office look like?
It's actually been pretty fluid in the sense that we've had plenty of notice coming into it. It's still very much down to what works largely between you and your line manager, which is quite comforting for someone such as myself. And although there's been guidelines around, you know, on average 2 or 3 days a week would look good, there has been the encouragement though to work it out directly with your line manager and get the support that you need to what is working for you. I would say that kind of encouragement has been taken with open arms across the business. It's been quite positive. I've heard stories similar to what David said, where it's, you know, you need to be in 3 days a week, and it could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which is a bit of a running joke in the industry right now. But I think one thing that Aviva did do well was to give you that support and say, you know, work it out with your line managers, alongside obviously telling you on average what might look good, but giving you that optionality, and I think that is the way forward.
So following up just on what David is saying, they're really very much taking that tailored and individual approach. And Tim, if I may turn to you, and I'm sure you're probably going to say something a little similar, but what does good support look like for you as offices reopen for, and specifically for other people with disabilities in your work stream?
Yeah, I was just thinking earlier about the storytelling thing and trying to find a good example. So another person in my work stream who had a sight impairment, they're not blind, but they have a sight impairment. They have very large monitors, they have a large keyboard, they have a special mouse, and they were having to get up early, 5 AM, to get into the office, to be the first person in the office, so they could clean their desk because it was set up for them and nobody else. Obviously, as you were saying about communication with your line manager, she managed to communicate with the people who look after the hot desk booking system, if you like, to say, I need to come in on certain days and I need that desk to be available for me. And initially there was frustration and barriers, but over the time that we've gone back into the office, it's much better now, and she can now book her desk on the day that she needs to go in and not have to get up at 5 AM. So, you know, there have been challenges, but there have been improvements as well.
They've been overcome, that's great. And Jaya, what does good mental health support look like as offices reopen? Are you seeing a greater need for managers to be able to spot the signs of mental health issues or burnout?
Massively. I think, you know, at the end of the day, especially over the time period that we were working from home, the people you interacted with most were your line managers and your team. So essentially, they would likely be the first point of call who would notice something might be slightly different with you. Or, you know, if, say, for example, I'll take an example of grief, that's the person you might notify if you need to take some time off, right? So I think it's really important that, be it or maybe not line managers, but somebody in your business needs to be receiving some sort of training, whether that's mental health first aid training or whether that is, like we do in Aviva, line manager training for mental health support, so you can learn how to spot the signs or you can learn how to ask the right questions. That kind of support needs to be in place across all of our businesses so that we're investing appropriately in our people. I mean, EAP is one thing, and I really do hope everyone in this room has some form of EAP available to them. I mean, it's for every £1 your company spends on EAP, I think the report that came out from Sodexo recently was you get over £7 back in return on income. So, you know, that's a starting point. It's great, but you need somebody there who's able to spot the signs. They're not, and I would like to highlight this, they are not expected to be your therapist, your counsellor. They are not the ones providing you with the end support. But whether it's your mental health first aider or your line manager, they need to be equipped enough to spot the signs so that they can signpost you in the right direction so that you can get the help that you need. And it's going back to what we've said throughout, you know, this session. If you invest in your people will be there for you. So that's what good looks like from a mental health perspective, training and signposting.
Thank you, Jaya. That's great. And David, perhaps turning back to you and talking a little bit about how firms can implement some of those support measures that you touched on earlier. I mean, do you have any examples of best practice you can share?
Well, for me, one of the keys is training line managers to cope better with supervising teams that are not all under their gaze. When everyone was at home, I think managers generally worked things out as they went along, but it's perhaps more of a challenge in a hybrid world when you're in meeting rooms with some colleagues, but not others. Despite 18 months of practice, maybe some managers still feel deep down that managing means watching people at work, seeing how many hours a day they sit at their desk and judging whether they look busy. So I think this involves training managers to understand neurodiversity. Even in some enlightened businesses, I suspect awareness levels are still pretty low. Once you have that understanding, you can implement support measures that either allow remote working or, in some cases this is genuinely impossible, identify what adjustments you need to make to the office environment. And these adjustments, in many cases, are very straightforward, they're very inexpensive, but they can make a huge difference.
Thank you. And perhaps, Tim, if I can pose the same question to you, do you have any examples of best practice you could share for us from the perspective of your work stream?
Yes, so I think there are different degrees of disability. So, you know, I'm deaf. My needs are different from another deaf person. I know somebody who works for another bank who had a full-time interpreter with them all day, every day. So when they're in the office, they need to have the interpreter with them. It's important for them to plan what days they're going in and what days they're not going in. Just like this event has been planned for a long time, and all the presentations and packs have gone over to the captioners so they can program the captions. You know, that's really important. Before we went back to the office, my HR team actually contacted me to be involved in part of a return to work council, if you like. And there were 11 people on the call, and I looked around and didn't really know many people, but I said, oh, is there anyone else here that has a disability? And they said, no, we're all from HR, we're just asking you what your thoughts are. And I thought, okay, that's great, you know. Initially, my first thought was, how many people does it take to change the light bulb? Sort of thing. But I thought, oh, it's great, we're taking an interest. And I thought, well, I don't want to talk about me and my deafness. I want to talk about other people that I know that have a disability because, you know, I'm a share of a work stream. And I talked about people who have loud monitors, special keyboard, deaf people who are neurodiverse that need to get in a particular place in the office, people in wheelchairs who need to be close to the disabled toilet, or close to the lift, and just made them aware of all the different things that they need to think about when going back into the office, and then how the online booking system needs to work with those people. And that was really great that they took that initiative and contacted me, and then I put them in touch with other people and said, you ought to talk to these people as well. And that has been really great, a great initiative from my company.
And I sort of feel that we keep referencing back to this point of really just a tailored individualistic approach, really seems to work the best. And I guess, Rosanna, just coming on to you for a second as well, also ensuring that managers are fully supported. And obviously there are challenges for managers managing hybrid teams. Do you have any thoughts about how we can support them?
Yeah, and it's interesting that this is coming out, because it's something that has come out all year long in all the work that we have done at the Diversity Project and tried to change inside the firm of our work stream, the employment policy and the flexible working policy. The thing that has been noticed that most of the time you have the CEO, the top management is really into it. They want to change. The employee are there, yes, finally. And then you get stuck because you have your line manager that maybe has just been promoted and is the one that in the Zoom call you see is always in the office, and people sort of feel obliged to go back. So there is really this need that has come, and it's not typical to one firm or the other. It's really come across all the firm that each company really needed to retrain, or at least do the right training to the line manager to make sure that they understand that things has changed, they understand and they have all the instruments able to deal with personal requirement, special requirement, exceptional circumstances. They need to know to who they have to address, maybe readdress the person if they have some peculiar circumstances. And for the moment, truly we have all been thrown into this lockdown and work from home, but the line manager is across really the industry needs a proper retraining, or at least needs a proper list of things that they have to do, or the right answer to the question that people will ask. So it's something that I know that certain companies, because we've done a little bit of checking, have started being doing. I can give the example, for example, Fidelity International with the push. They were a little bit early in this push of flexible working. There has been a proper training put in place, and the line manager have a sort of deck with what to answer, to who you have to address at the HR if certain people have a certain need. But at least there is a sort of roadmap, and they know how to behave, because yes, it's becoming a sort of a one-on-one conversation and one-on-one proper answer according to the individual need.
Perfect, Rosanna, thank you. And actually, you've helpfully also answered one of our questions as well, which is just down there on tips for people managers. So I think we've probably got a couple of minutes, hopefully. I'm looking for, we can just maybe do a couple of quick questions. Maybe one for you, Jaya, if that's okay. This is a question. If you have a very young family and a long commute, the return to the office is a kicker for mental health. Any advice?
I hate my commute. I'll say that loud and proud. I hate my commute, but unfortunately my commute is my choice because I decided to live really far away from the office. Yes, long commutes have a really, really big impact to mental health, and I know exactly what that can feel like. I can't help with the young family side of things, but when it comes to the commute, what I found worked for me in a previous role was I arranged with my line manager, and it goes back to exactly what we were saying time and time again, a time of day I would start coming into the office, and it was after the rush hour because I just could not handle that. After being pushed around in a train, it just exhausted me, you know. I at that point spent nearly 3 hours a day just on a train back and forth, not 3 hours each way. and it really does do a lot to your stress levels. It makes you exhausted. It can make you feel like it's something called revenge procrastination, which is being talked about now. It can make you sit up in bed a little bit longer because your body is taking out revenge on the long day, and it's making you procrastinate. So you can have some me time, and that me time means you'll sleep later and you'll be more tired the next day, and it impacts your productivity. It impacts what you can deliver at work. So I just go back and say, you know, you've got to work out a time or a day or a routine that works for you, and be bold. Speak to your line manager and say, these are my requirements as an employee, and that's your line manager's job to support you.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I've got a quick question here. Have you got any companies that we can approach for help with manager retraining for the hybrid world? Certainly Rosanna and I certainly both do. I'm not sure whether we're allowed to give them out in this forum, but feel free to contact us certainly after this, either via LinkedIn or via the Diversity Project, and we'll be more than happy to put you in contact with some firms that we've been speaking to. And I guess just one last one, Rosanna, for you, maybe this one. Are there intergenerational tensions when it comes to return to the office versus working from home and flexible working?
Oh, yes.
And I guess not just intergenerationally, but also...
Yeah, it's intergenerational, you know, female versus man. I mean, it's something that goes back actually to a point that we've been talking a lot at the Diversity Project, all the steer committees, all this data, and I've been pushing all the firm. It is possible to start gather the data of who is coming to the office, because you needed to start keep an eye. Yes, you have the younger people that are keen to come back to the office, and you can understand it was unbearable to live in a shared flat with other 4 people that actually you realize at the end of the second week that you ate it and you don't want to share the flat anymore. And I think a lot of firms actually have been, and we go back to the positivity of these things, have been really open and listened to the employee. And I know several firms that even during the strict lockdown have opened the door of the office because they knew that certain people couldn't stand to work from home, or people with very young children that were keep on screaming and they couldn't concentrate. I mean, there has been that. So yes, there is a little bit also of intergenerational of, you can see on the floor if you go back to the office. I think what is most important that I'm really encouraging, and as a work stream we are encouraging the firm, is to gather data. In order to double check that you don't start noticing a little bit of behavioral change, or having all the women the sort of work flexible and all the men that comes back to the 9 and 5. And I don't want to stereotype, but unfortunately that's what actually can happen, because we have to say that a lot of women had all the burden of the school time and preparing food while we were all stuck at home. And I think what is important, if we are able to gather this data and then keep on tracking these people, if in 3 or 5 years actually they had their promotion, even if they're working flexible, this is a fantastic data that you can show on your D&I sort of report, or show the regulator and say, you know, I've given formal or informal policy in terms of flexibility. That has been the take up, and you know what? People that have worked with flexibility, they have been able to gain in seniority inside the firm and get you know, high in the hierarchy, and there was no discrimination based on how long people have been on the office. So yes, unfortunately, we go back to capacity of collecting data, but I think it's a great opportunity for each of our firm, if they're able to collect the data and then track how these people have progressed, to have great data to show in terms of the flexibility works and is not an impediment in terms of progression of career.
That's great, and I think we've actually also got a session coming up as one of the breakout sessions specifically on D&I data as well, actually. So that might be something that many of us are interested in here.
If I can add just one thing, so because of this point of the training of the middle manager, you know, it's come up so many times. So Inside the work stream, we have 2 people that are actually consultant in terms of flexible policy. So I've been working with a lot of firms, and with Garrett, we have really pushed them. So hopefully by the end of the year, beginning of next year, we're going to put together a sort of very short, that could be the skeleton of what can be the first line training for your middle manager in terms of how they can be able to answer this question and manage all these real individual requirements. So stay tuned. Normally you're going to be bombarded with emails from us on these things, but you know we are here to also to help. We're trying to gather as much information, and feel free, like Garrett to say, to ask if you need more.
Fabulous. Rosanna, thank you. I'm conscious that we're, according to the sign up there, running out of time. So I guess we should just move now to really a final question to you all. Do each of you have a call to action from your specific work stream that you'd like to challenge the firms that are here today? And perhaps I can start with with you, Tim.
Okay, yes. So when I was talking to my work stream about what my company has done for me, and the question they'd asked me, there was a very mixed reaction, and some people said, oh, I wish my company would do the same. And I remember saying to them, you know, it's up to you as well. You need to tell your company how you're feeling. And quite recently, in the run-up to the International Day of People with Disabilities, we have encouraged our work stream to share stories, personal stories about their different disabilities, so deafness, MS, whatever, so that people learn a little bit more about disabilities, and also to communicate more with their companies. It's not always up to the line manager to ask, you know, the individual. You know, it goes both ways, and I've seen the benefit of approaching my line manager, and I've seen the benefit of it going the other way. So that's no one asked, you know, to communicate with what your needs are, and you know, your company, I'm pretty sure, will help you.
Thank you. And Jaya, from you.
I'm echoing what I've been saying throughout the session, but to support what Tim actually just said, every line manager or somebody in the business needs some form of mental health training so that they can spot the signs. But on the other side, we, you know, as individuals need to ask for the help that we need. So be honest, and hopefully you shall receive.
Thank you. And David.
2 calls for actions. First, as you've heard from me already, I'd say to the firms, is your return to office policy flexible and tailored, and does it properly take account of an individual's particular role and the business function? And the other, which Rosanna referred to just a few minutes ago, say to firms, are you properly going to measure and reward productivity and performance in a way that doesn't overly focus on where the work is physically being done? Because there's going to be big differences in the future as to where people are working, and you've got to ensure that you have the mechanisms in place that doesn't have a systemic bias towards assessing future prospects and performance based on whether people were seen in the office more or less often than other people.
Absolutely, thank you. And lastly, Rosanna, and I sort of probably know what you're going to say, but yeah.
Yeah, so I put up, these are the 5 calls for action that the Smart Working work stream is pushing through the firm that are part of our work stream, and we are pushing also to all the members of the diversity project. And you know, they're up there for you to read. They're on the website. I can only say 2 things. As one, that there is a tailwind also from the government manifesto. They are committed to promote flexible working, and subject to the consultation that they are having, they will introduce to make it as a default. So as a manager of asset management firm or in the investment industry, I think you have the legal, moral, and ethical obligation to get going on that subject, because it's going to become, in one form or another, compulsory. it's a sort of moral obligation, because there is no more excuse that any manager can give in terms of not allowing a certain flexibility. And it's becoming also ethical because of all the things that my colleague here have said. You know, there are individual needs that have to be listened if you want to have a diverse and inclusive culture.
Thank you, Rosanna. I think probably just to close up now, just to say with a couple of final points, probably from what we've discussed today, the key to success for firms as they return to the office is to properly consider the support and training for line managers. I think that's obviously key. And secondly, to tailor their approach around flexible working at an individual level, and hopefully that means that we can move into 2022 and beyond with a truly inclusive workforce. My thanks to the panel today. Thank you very much to you, both in the hall here and watching and listening online. And I'll now hand back to Matt.